Snyder-Man, Snyder-Man, friendly neighborhood dealer man. Spins a deal any size. You got good stuff, he will buy. Hey there, here comes the Snyder-Man. Here comes the Snyder-Man. Here comes the Snyder-Man. Snyder-Man.
Hey fellow collectors, I'm Anthony with Anthony's Comic Book Art, and I'm here with legendary illustrator Alan Milgrom. Now, Mr. Milgrom. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So when did you start in comics?
Excuse me. I began in 1972.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The first thing I did was I inked a job for Charlton. That was a little earlier than that, actually.
Okay.
Which I got through Rich Buckler, who was a friend of mine at the time.
I did a lot of business with Rich over the years. Yeah.
Anyway, but I was in college. I graduated. I went to junior high and high school with Jim Starlin. We were in the same general. We lived one town apart and went to the same school. And we were both comic guys. And when I met him, I said, "Well, this guy's much better than I am. Maybe I should just learn to ink his stuff." But he went off. He got in. He entered the Navy.
Yeah, he went in.
He went to college, and he did about a 4-year stint, and I did about a 5-year stint in the college, University of Michigan. Once I graduated, I actually went to art school there, and when I graduated, Jim had already mustered out, and he was in New York and already getting some work up at Marvel. And he said, "Why don't you come out? I got an apartment here. We're going to be needing an extra roommate. So why don't you come out and you can move in with us, and we'll get to work." So
Well, that's really very interesting, because the main thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that 72, 73, 74, 75, right in there, that's when I was reading comics as a kid.
Okay.
And this, your cosmic stuff with Jim,
Yep.
and magic,
Well,
the magic that
all
this.
the credit goes to Jim. He was writing and drawing a lot of this material.
Yeah,
And
sure, but you made it look amazing.
He created Thanos while we were still back in Michigan. I have some old pages that he did with that, with Thanos sample stories he was working on. But he was tremendously talented. We also met Mike Vosberg, who's another Michigander. He was a couple years older. We met him, I think Jim and I were both about 13 years old. And we met Mike, and he was at the time better than we were. So there was a little coffee clatch of cartoonists there, young cartoonists.
You still called yourselves cartoonists at the time?
Well,
and you were doing the strip that was Captain Marvel, but
we were hoping to be cartoonists. And when I moved to New York after I graduated from school, I did move in with the guys in Jim's apartment. There was Starland, Mike Friedrich, the writer, Bill Dubay, the editor of Warren Comics, and Steve Skates, who was a writer for DC and Marvel, and he was all over the place. And Mike Friedrich.
Mike Friedrich, yeah.
He was from California. He didn't like New York. He wanted to move back home, and he felt like he'd already established himself, so he moved back, and I got his room. So that was that.
But again, how do you attribute the magic that this run and the work you did with? Because the magic is just there. I mean, an actor and a director can get together, make a beautiful movie, and then the next movie it sucks. But the magic is there, and
frankly, sometimes it's just magic. And
right?
You can't explain magic.
Right.
But it was, Starland is a tremendously talented guy. He can write, he can draw, he can ink if he has to. He did a couple jobs coloring. It was like, the auteur school of comic book work. He was the one-man show. He wrote it and drew it. It was his baby, and he took over Captain Marvel, which was a very weak seller at the time.
Yeah.
And
But so you answered to him with your
pretty
inking?
much, in fact,
He was kind of a one-man show editor as well?
he was not technically the editor, but for all intents and purposes.
But let's give... Jim has one of the strongest personalities I've ever met in comics.
Okay.
How about you?
Work or him
His strong, no, personally, he's very confident, self-contained, and he knows what he wants, he knows what he likes, and he knows what he doesn't like. Okay, but not in an abusive way, But I don't see people really telling Jim anything when he was creating stuff like this.
Yeah,
right?
and inevitably, if he ever clashed with the editorial people, he'd get pissed off and quit, and then he'd go across the street to DC, and he'd work at DC for a while, and then eventually somebody up there would piss him off, and he'd come back tomorrow.
There you go.
And that's
So very strong, self-possessed personality. Yes.
He may think of it differently, but as an outsider, that was pretty much my perception.
What do you mean an outsider? You were one of his best friends. You're his roommate.
I wasn't responsible for him quitting.
No, of course
You know what
not.
I'm saying?
Yes.
So,
You probably didn't like that. It's like, what are you going to do then?
no, it didn't bother. Listen, Jim, like you say, he's a strong-willed guy.
Yeah.
And look.
Now, what did he do in the Navy?
He was a proven. He was a photographer.
Oh, really? Okay, he was a visual artist too.
Fly aerial missions. And
Okay, all right.
Snapped
In Vietnam.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Vietnam era.
That was. That was.
Yep.
Yep. So anyway, Jim, he knew what he wanted to do. He was very good at it. Invariably, the books he took over would sell better when he was doing them.
Right.
And so all he wanted was to be left alone.
Right.
And if anybody interfered with him,
He had a clash.
him off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, it sounds similar to, not a generation before, but a few years before with Mr. Strenko. Very strong personality, very confident. You can't really tell. He was going to do what he was going to do.
Right.
And, oh my God, he just did genius work. Leave him alone. That's the story that...
I don't know. Did Strenko get interfered with a lot? I wasn't under that impression.
No.
Yeah. But...
Because he only answered to Stan.
Okay. But
Stan hired him. Stan said, what did you want to do? Right? That's the story, right? And he's like, oh, that spy one, I like that. He's like, okay, we're going to cancel this. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sure.
And then he made some of the best work ever.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, Strenko, whose work, by the way, I love. But he had like one of the shortest careers in comics of anybody.
Right. Under 50 issues.
Yeah, I was going to say if he did 40 issues of
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure exact the number,
he did
but
a couple, self-published, or he did stuff for, he did that adaptation of the Sean Connery science fiction movie Outland. I think.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Remember that? And he did a couple of things with Byron Price, and and a few dozen Marvel comics.
Right.
And a job for DC here and there.
And then
so for a guy who did really a minuscule amount of work in terms of comics, he had a very, very big influence.
Yes, as little work as he did, he had as much of a big impact.
He did have a very big impact.
Yes.
And Starland was a lifer. He did comics.
Right.
His whole, career.
Yeah.
Strenko, he was an escape artist. He was in publishing. He was in.
Well, Stan gave him FOOM in the merchandising to handle in California when the other guy just ripped everybody off. It's like, oh, I need to get a hold of this. Can you do this? And that's when he was the managing editor of FOOM, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is that what you call him?
He created Comic Scene, that magazine.
Okay.
And then ultimately sold it, and it became Media Scene. I think he was still doing it. It became Media Scene, so it was more of a mass media, not strictly comic related.
So
I think he sold that ultimately for a fair amount of money.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, I get along with Jim very well. He actually really likes me. And
Why not?
For what I do, I have that strong personality too, and he just seems to like. He's like, yeah, you're a planet with your orbit, and I'm a planet with my orbit.
Well, I'm more like a satellite.
Right.
But when Jim was starting to work for Jim Starlin.
Right.
Too many JS's in this story.
Right.
Jim was getting some work on his own, and I took my samples around, and I got a lot of pats on the head. But ultimately, what I ended up doing, after a very short stint working with Buckler again, I was assisting him. He was
on some Charlton stuff.
No. This was on Marvel stuff.
Oh, okay.
He was doing Kazar, and he was doing Man-Thing.
Okay.
And so he would do layouts, and I would tighten them up into hopefully tight pencils. But that didn't work out, and then I had an offer to go work for Murphy Anderson, the wonderful
yeah, of course.
artist,
Yeah.
who had worked at DC for many decades.
And he was a group editor, wasn't he?
No, Murph wasn't an editor.
Never an
He was
editor?
freelancing. No, never an editor.
He didn't like
I don't
head
think
up.
so.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
No, at the time when I went to work for him, he was inking Superman over Kurt Swan.
Yeah.
And he had a number of assistants, including, I believe, Dave Cockrum, Wayne Howard. You know the artist Wayne Howard?
No.
He was a kind of a Wally Wood imitator.
Okay.
Pretty good. And Jack Abel had been doing
Well,
that
Jack
by
Abel,
himself.
yeah, of course.
Jack had been inking the book, but
That's another one of those like little magic periods where the Trimpy Abel stuff.
yes,
I
that's a good combo.
love.
Also Abel on Paul Galassi.
Oh yeah, that's true as well. Very nice. But that Trimpy Abel Hulk stuff is some of my favorite stuff that just reaches into my nostalgia heart, just like this stuff. And the McLaughlin, Salvus and McLaughlin Defenders. That bronze. Those were my three favorite things.
We all have our sweet spots
Right.
in terms of what we love.
So when you were getting established with Jim as an inker, is that how you moved on from there?
Well, what happened was, I was working for Murphy doing the backgrounds, and sweet guy and a good teacher, and at the end of about a year, Starland got a short story to do.
All right, tell him we'll work it out on what I owe him.
For me to ink it, and I inked it, and it turned out very well. It was a Gray Mouser story for a book they called Sword of Sorcery.
Oh, that Bernie did, and that one, that DC one?
Yeah, it was a DC book.
Short-lived, but...
Yeah, it lasted 5 or 6 issues.
Right. Yeah, but Bernie did some included... Chaikin, yeah.
Simonson worked on some.
Yeah.
So I inked this backup story of the Gray Mouser that Starlin drew, and I inked it. And based on that, people saw what I was doing on that, and Dave Cockrum asked me to help him out inking an issue of Legion of Superheroes or Superboy, whatever it was at the time. And then
it was Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Simonson saw what I was doing, and he was always, having trouble with his deadlines. So he said, "Could you come out to my place in Brooklyn?" He was doing the lead story with Fafford and the Gray Mouser for the same one that Starland had done the Mouser story as a backup. And what was happening was Walt did rough layouts, and then it was scripted, and then lettered, and then so I moved in with him for about a week, and he would tighten up pages and hand them over to me, and I would ink those. And then shortly there, and then based on the job I did over Starland, Starland took me over to Marvel, and he said, he introduced me to John Verporten, who was the production manager, and he said, "John, this is Al Milgrom. He's going to be inking Captain Marvel from now on," which Jim had he had done 2 or 3 issues. And it was rotating inkers.
Okay. Yeah, but again, an example of that strong personality that he went in and dictated to his editor, "This is my guy," and the story.
Yeah.
But the magic.
Gordon was really the production manager.
Yeah, but
and he looked up and he went,
Yeah,
And
right?
he went back to proofreading. So
Yeah.
that kind of,
I love that story.
yeah, it was great. And
That's
then
awesome.
I inked several issues of Captain Marvel, and then Jim had a couple of issues inked by other guys, Dan Green
Yeah.
and Steve Lealoha, of course.
Yeah, lovely guy. I love
Yeah.
I love Steve's work.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
I love it.
And I was getting work from other people, so I wasn't depending on Captain Marvel for my
Okay.
living. But then at some point, Jim decided to leave the book. I don't remember what the reason was now, but I'm sure he had a reason at the time. And so I had done some samples, penciling, and they said, oh, this stuff looks pretty good. And so they said, he draws somewhat similarly to Starland. Let's put him on Captain Marvel. He can take it over. And so they got me to pencil it, and they got Steve Englehart to write it.
Yeah.
He took over that book. And then later, Steve and Starlin had been doing Master of Kung Fu, and I was inking that. And then Jim left that book, and I took over that book. It was like, I was just picking up whatever Jim left, basically.
Okay.
The only one that didn't happen with was Warlock.
Right.
So, but by then I was getting a reputation as being, passable as an artist and somewhat reliable. And I got to
A little more than capable. Come on.
maybe.
Yeah.
But I got to do the old Guardians of the Galaxy, book,
Right.
which was was a lot of fun. Steve Gerber was the writer. It was crazy stuff. I never knew what he was going to hit me with next, because it was so offbeat. And I once said, "Do you know where this story's going, Steve? Because I'm not following." He says, "I have no idea." He says, "I'll figure it out when we get there." I said, "Okay."
Right.
And then he left the book. So the next.
And it
writer-
never did go anywhere.
It never did go anywhere. But the next.
Until
writer-
they found
the
this
next writer
third
pulled-
string characters to make a movie out of.
Yeah. Well, that's not, Roger Stern took over the title as a writer, and he was very good and very good fundamentals, and he pulled it together and
Okay.
finished the storyline. So, and it was not a great seller. A lot of the
No.
books I did not last long, but that was one of them. That one only lasted 9 issues.
So overall, if you said you're a comic book artist, you just how would you describe inker, penciler, comic book artist in general? What's your title?
I was a good utility guy.
Yeah, utility guy. Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed inking because it gave me the chance to collaborate with not only some of my contemporaries and friends, but I've inked Kirby, I've inked Ditko, I've inked Joe Kubert, I've inked, you name it. I've inked almost, I never inked Murphy Anderson, but
Wow.
he did ink me. I got to work with a lot of these old pros whose work I grew up reading and really just adoring.
Right.
I've inked Carmine Infantino, I've inked Bill Kane. So I got to ink, the guys who were my idols growing up. And, that's a thrill for me. But of course, penciling is more creative.
Mm-hmm.
It's the more creative part of the process. And I enjoy doing that and putting my stamp on characters. And, I went over to DC for a stint and I co-created Firestorm, who was, again, a flop. Lasted 5 issues. DC imploded. And, then, 30, 40 years later, he's on a TV show. So,
Yeah.
it's a
That's
funny
awesome.
business. Yeah, yeah.
But do you go back? Do you harken back to this moment, like this time with the cosmic, and this
Those
that
were
magic?
the good old days. And
Do you feel
early
like?
in my career.
Yeah.
Very nostalgic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
It fills your heart with pride to have been a part of that.
Yeah.
Because that was special.
Yeah, but again, it's special because Starland was the creative force behind it. His pencils were very tight.
Okay.
All I had to do was ink what was there. There was
Okay.
I did a good job, I think. Don't get me wrong, but that was Jim.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And you're still doing it today. You're showing up. You're doing your sketches. You're doing your signings.
Yeah.
You have the fans that are appreciating your work, and that goes back to my childhood. I'm 57 years old. I was 12 years old when that came out.
That's right.
I was born in '64, so that was '73, '74, right in that heart of that bronze 20-cent era.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it was a great time.
It was a great time.
I was born in 1950. I'm 71 now. I loved comics as a kid. I read, I was reading DC regularly, and then when Marvel came on the scene, I just said, wow, this is some great stuff, Kirby, Ditko, I was not familiar with them, at all. And, I went to college. I spent a year and a half in just, lit school, getting a general education.
Liberal arts school again?
Yeah, essentially,
Right.
yeah. Liberal arts is
But not an art school.
No, but what happened was it was getting to be the time I had to declare a major, and I said, I was taking a lot of English classes. I said, I don't want to be a teacher. That's not my calling. I said, maybe I should really see if I can get into this cartooning stuff. And so I went and tried to transfer into the art school, and I had to overcome some difficulty. I took in samples of my work, which was comic book style drawing, and the dean of the art school chuckled, and he said, well, it's not the kind of stuff we usually see here, but there's definitely something good going on here. So all I had to do was get my French grade up, because I got a D in French one semester, and he said, you can't transfer, with a D. And I said, but there's no language requirement in the art school. And he said, well, that's true, but there is one in the school rules are you can't transfer from liberal arts into the art school with a D on your record.
Okay.
And I said, but if I don't have to take the language once I'm in the art school, what difference does it make? I said, it's like a catch-22. He said, yeah, it really makes no sense, but I have to follow the rules. So I said, okay, so I took that semester of French a second time, got a C, never looked back.
And Milgrom is what? Your heritage.
Oh, let's see, my dad's folks, I think they were, I don't even know. Were they German Jews? Were they Slavic?
Oh, okay.
Idea.
I thought it might have been a little French in there.
No.
It was shortened.
No.
One of those shortened.
Sacre bleu.
Yeah,
I would
right.
not have failed if I was French.
No, my mother made me take French because she was half French. But yeah.
No. I'm not even sure, if that's my actual name or if it was changed.
I don't go by my real name. My dad changed his name from Sinodinos, in the Greek. So
my dad, I was still pretty young. My dad died when I was 17.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I never thought to ask him about it. But I know my mom's folks were Russian Jews.
Oh, okay.
And they immigrated.
All right.
Yeah, my
That's
grandfather
cool.
was in the Russian army, and they weren't particularly fond of the Jews. But
yeah,
he was a hard worker, and I think he did okay over there, but he did better in this country.
Right, I understand. Well, thanks so much.
By the way, just as a little side note, my grandparents, their name in Europe was Gudlansky.
Oh, okay.
But when they came through Ellis Island, they kindly changed the name to Goodman
Oh, okay.
for them. And I am related to Martin Goodman, who was the publisher of Marvel Comics.
Oh, okay.
Small world.
That's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the guy who hired a young Stan Lee. It was his nephew.
Well, Stan was a relation. I may be
He was his
related to
nephew,
Stan,
right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, then you are related to Stan if it
probably
was
was,
nephew.
yeah.
At least by marriage in that respect,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. Could have been
Yeah.
one of those once removed deals.
Yeah, I never understood that. But
No, I never
what isn't removed is like the work you did on these covers, like with it's another magic time with Mr. Golden. So I'd really love you to sign all these for me, and thanks so much for sharing your history with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Of course, though, these covers are by Dave Cockrum and me. not.
Yeah,
Michael
Cockrum
Gold.
and you.
But
Oh, yeah,
Michael
yeah.
did the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
interiors,
Michael did the interiors. Yeah. Oh, excuse me. Yeah.
Okay, so
you spoke
yeah.
on that one.
Well, that again, as I did do a stint as an editor both at DC and Marvel, and part of the reason I wanted to see what life was like on the other side of the desk, and how I, would interact with people. I created the Marvel Fanfare title,
Okay.
and did a lot of stuff. I developed a lot of very good talent. I gave Mike Mignola his first job. I didn't give Golden his first job. I think he worked at DC with Larry Hama before I ever did. But
Okay.
Kevin Nolan,
Awesome.
Rick Leonardi, all guys I gave the first job to, and I was instrumental in getting Ron Friends his work at Marvel too.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I
I
did
love
a ton
that.
of work with him.
So it's like a coaching tree, like in the NFL. Like, oh, you're an assistant here, and now you're a head coach there.
It gave me more guys to ink, so
Yeah.
it benefited me too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway,
so you were seeding your future employment.
But also ensuring that there were enough good guys got into the business
Right.
that eventually I'd be unemployed.
Okay.
It's true.
All right. You want to get these done?
Sure.
Great. What do you got? You got something like? Yeah. All right.
I mean, I'll do it whatever you want.
Yeah. Whatever you want. I'm gonna go downstairs and get Joseph and Michael to sign these too.
Sure. Yeah, it's a shame Bill can't. Okay, if they're gonna sign also, tell me where you want me to sign it. I can sign here.
Yeah.
Or
You
here.
could like down there too. Okay.
This book, and by the way, Bill Manlow was the one who brought these characters to Marvel's attention. His daughter loved playing with the toys.
Right, the toys, yeah.
And
they were toys first.
Exactly. And at the time, Marvel was doing a lot of licensing. So they,
work.
and we got a lot of flack for that. A lot of the fans said, "Oh, you're sellouts. You should only do Marvel characters." Blah blah blah. But it's a publishing house. We publish stuff and hope to make money, whatever it is. So we were doing the Micronauts, Godzilla, Shogun Warriors,
G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, of course, was a very successful one.
Yeah.
Rom.
He-Man.
He-Man, of course. Ultimately, we did Tarzan, Star Trek, Star Wars, US 1, let's not forget. That's the one about a truck and a truck driver, which I wrote. The weird thing about Micronauts was half the characters were based on the toys from, was it Mego? I can't remember. But half of them were new characters that Bill Manlow created. So I don't know if they've ever been able to reprint these. Because I think they had trouble agreeing on how the money would be split up on reprints. Which is too bad, because I inked a lot of them and I would have gotten some money. But, c'est la guerre.
There you go with that French again.
French again, yeah.
Not the right expression. Yeah.
He's okay in terms of his brother being able to take care of him financially. I hope so.